Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thank you so much for tuning in here on Tuesday, January 7th. The day after Black Monday, the Jaguars moved on from head coach Doug Peterson. They are keeping Trent Baalke in place as the general manager for the Jaguars. And they have very kindly shared with us a list of interview requests for their head coaching vacancy. 2025 head coaching cycle, the Jaguars, there's some big names on this list. Some guys that fans would be very excited about. So we're going to take a look at this list. We're going to rank the guys, offer some notes, etc., on how this list is looking for the Jaguars head coaching search. And again, you have heard reports, rumors that Trent Baalke could potentially limit the Jaguars coaching search. We haven't heard anyone to this point that is going to decline an interview with the Jaguars. If someone's offered the job and they don't accept, we'll know more then. But at this point, it looks like the Jaguars are going to be interviewing many of the top names and a lot of the guys that were among the favorites among local media and fans to potentially get interviews and become the Jaguars' next head coach. So we're going to dive into it. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. So this list, released by the Jaguars, includes Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, Eagles offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken, Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady, Bucks offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. Common theme there, offensive coordinators, right? Raiders defensive coordinator Patrick Graham and former Jets head coach Robert Saleh, who is a defensive guy, has coached in Jacksonville before as a linebackers coach. I appreciate the transparency there. Nice, easy list for us. A couple notes on the timeline of these potential interviews. As of right now, all of these interviews for people that are under contract would be virtual. Patrick Graham's contract with the Raiders is up. So he can interview freely, not only for head coaching jobs, but defensive coordinator jobs, because again, not under contract right now. Also, Robert Saleh can interview wherever he wants. He's not under contract by the Jets. They fired him, right? Those are two guys, obviously, to keep an eye on this week. Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn from Detroit, because the Detroit Lions have a bye week, they can virtually interview with the Jaguars this week and all the other teams that have requested to meet with them. Liam Cohen from Tampa, he can't interview until next week at the earliest, right? Next week, the Bucks host the Commanders in the wild card weekend. So after that game, 3 days after that game, he will be allowed to interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Same thing with Todd Monken, Joe Brady, and Kellen Moore, all of whom are coaching teams in the playoffs right now. All those teams have games this weekend. They will not be able to virtually interview with the Jaguars until next week. Those interviews must take place 3 days, at least 3 days after those respective teams' wild card games and before the divisional round. Otherwise, they'll have to wait until the end of the playoffs, right? So, ranking these coaching candidates, talking a little bit about these guys here. I think that Robert Saleh and Patrick Graham would be at the bottom of this list. And to me, they might not only be interviewing for the head coaching job, but also getting an idea of what these guys could potentially be as defensive coordinators should they hire an offensive head coach. Now, the other defensive coordinator candidate here, Aaron Glenn, he's going to be getting a head coaching job somewhere. So that's going to be off the table. But it's very possible that Patrick Graham, Robert Saleh could become defensive coordinators next year in the NFL. I definitely don't see Robert Saleh getting a head coaching job. I know Patrick Graham's going to have some interest. But if you have Robert Saleh or Patrick Graham as your defensive coordinator, that's a really good spot to be in. Those are great defensive minds. We've seen what Robert Saleh did in New York. What plagued him is what you worry about with defensive coordinators becoming head coaches, right? The handling of the offense, the hiring of the offensive coordinators. It was a train wreck in New York. And so, yeah, he did a great job with the defense. I think he's a good leader. I think he'd be a great defensive coordinator candidate. I think Patrick Graham would be a great defensive coordinator candidate. So those two are at the bottom of my list. At number 6 for me of these guys, the 8 guys the Jaguars have named in their interview requests, we've got Todd Monken, who I think could be a fantastic candidate. He is a little bit older. He's not like Pete Carroll or Tom Coughlin, right? He is in his mid to late 50s there. Todd Monken is. He was Jaguars wide receiver coach way back when, has done a tremendous job with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, really elevating that passing game, which you'd love to see the Jaguars passing game get elevated with Trevor Lawrence here. Did a really good job with Georgia as their offensive coordinator before that. So Todd Monken would be really fun, and he's a guy with a heck of a personality. So that'd be an interesting one. Joe Brady, I have at number 5. A little bit less experience overall, right? Was the offensive coordinator in Carolina for a very small amount of time. I think he got scapegoated there when things weren't going well. Then you also look at his time in Buffalo. It's been a year and a half about, and that's been tremendous. A year and a half as their offensive coordinator. He got promoted in season last year after they decided to move on from their coordinator, who went on to go to Cleveland and just got fired from Cleveland as well. So, Joe Brady, I think what he's able to do with a passing game, the way he's able to connect with quarterbacks, did it with Joe Burrow at LSU as their passing game coordinator, has now done that. Same thing, gotten the most out of Josh Allen in that offense, as much or more than any other coordinator, including Brian Daboll, has been able to get out of that offense. So Joe Brady, in my opinion, very impressive. Kellen Moore, not a candidate a lot of folks talk about as much, but I think what he's done in Philly, specifically coming off of what they did last year and showing the ability to get things, to have more answers. Obviously, adding Saquon Barkley was huge for them, but they gave Saquon Barkley a environment to thrive in, to flourish in, and obviously a ton of talent in Philly on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. But I think Kellen Moore is a very interesting candidate. He's got a lot of experience as an offensive coordinator, as a player, working in different systems, working with different programs. I think he's a very interesting one to keep an eye on. Aaron Glenn, Lions defensive coordinator, played at a very high level for a very long time in the NFL. He's going to be as in demand as anyone out there on this NFL coaching search in 2025. For me, his leadership is tremendous. You've heard Dan Campbell just talk so highly about Aaron Glenn, and of course a head coach is going to do that, but I think it's legitimate. Aaron Glenn, what he's done with that defense this year, with all the injuries that they have sustained on that side of the ball, has been nothing short of amazing. I think that he's done a tremendous job. He's risen up the ranks. He's in line to probably be a very good head coach. But again, when you're talking about hiring a defensive coordinator, head coach, they've got to find someone on the offensive side of the ball that can run things. And if they're successful, they have to be able to create a pipeline on the offensive side of the ball to be able to run things. Because as soon as you have a very good football team with a very good offense and a young offensive coordinator, that guy's probably getting poached to be a head coach very soon, right? So that's the issue you run into with defensive guys. And the same thing could happen on the defensive side of the ball. If you have an offensive coach who loses their defensive coordinator, right? But when you have a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, I think the offensive infrastructure you should value just a little bit more than the defensive infrastructure. And look, both things are very, very important. Special teams is also important, right? I would love for the Jaguars to be able to keep Heath Farwell, quite frankly, as their special teams coach. So that's something that hasn't been talked about a lot, but I would love to see him stick around in Jacksonville with whoever comes in. And then again, at 2, I have Liam Cohen. We've talked about that here. I think what he did with Will Levis in Kentucky when Liam Cohen was coaching Will Levis, people thought he was going to be a top 10 pick. Obviously, that didn't happen. Didn't have a great year after Liam Cohen left. Liam Cohen has spent a lot of time with the Los Angeles Rams, with Sean McVay. What he did in Tampa Bay this year was unbelievable. I think he's got the youth on his side. So does, Kellen Moore, Joe Brady, Aaron. The only guy that's, in his 50s on this list, I believe, is Todd Monken. Everybody else is younger, so can probably relate a little bit more to the younger generation of guys coming in. But Liam Cohen, I think, does a great job connecting with his players, and he's dealt with some injuries in Tampa this year and been able to overcome those at a very high level, getting the most out of Baker Mayfield. Mike Evans getting his what was 11th straight 1,000 yard season, which is incredible. So I like Liam Cohen a lot. Would be a short move, 4 hour drive, right? From Tampa to Jacksonville, 3.5 hours maybe. Yeah, I'd be here for that one. And then Ben Johnson as well. You know, what he's done in Detroit with that offense. Obviously, he's had the offensive line in place, but being able to utilize each of those skill position weapons just magnificently, being creative, borrowing different ideas from around the league, developing game plans that attack weak points of the defense, creating mismatches, and rolling with the punches, and obviously being able to have that mind meld with Jared Goff, being able to take the Rams leftovers basically. One man's trash is another man's treasure type of situation with Jared Goff, and get Jared Goff playing at like a top 5, top 7 level in the NFL. I don't think Jared Goff is one of the 5 to 7 most talented quarterbacks in the league by any stretch, but from an efficiency standpoint, from a statistical standpoint, he's been operating at that level the last few years under Ben Johnson. So, that's kind of my rankings there. I think, again, Robert Saleh and Patrick Graham, this could be getting feelers and getting connections with and starting to feel out these guys as potential defensive coordinator candidates as well. And look, Graham should not be discounted as a head coaching candidate. Robert Saleh, again, I have a little bit more questions about as a head coach. But those are guys I could see being defensive coordinators this year. And remember, I've talked about this a lot, but just because you've seen a great play caller at their previous stop, at multiple stops, on offense or defense, that does not mean you're going to see a great head coach. Like, there's so many different factors: organizational structure, player personnel, adopting to all the new responsibilities. Like, when you go from being a coordinator to a head coach, there is so much added to your plate. Being a good delegator, a communicator, also handling situational coaching. These guys don't have to do as much of that. And being able to execute in the clutch in big moments as a decision maker in game is huge. Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen, anyone who hasn't done this before, even folks who have done it before, they could struggle with different aspects of this new job. And, it's possible that wherever Ben Johnson ends up, he struggles in areas that maybe someone else doesn't, like maybe Todd Monken. Like, who knows? It's just examples, right? But based on all the evidence that we do have, that is my list. Ben Johnson at 1, Liam Cohen at 2, Aaron Glenn at 3, Kellen Moore at 4, Joe Brady at 5, Monken at 6, Graham at 7, Saleh at 8. And whoever takes the Jaguars job under Shad Khan, they will be fighting an uphill battle against history. Shad Khan has not been a successful owner when it comes to the on-the-field product, right? The Jaguars have been, quite frankly, horrible and one of the 1 or 2 worst franchises in the NFL when it comes to winning since Shad Khan became the Jaguars owner. They'll also be fighting an uphill battle against, having Trent Baalke as their general manager. This is a guy who has gotten Jim Harbaugh fired, Jim Tomsula fired, Chip Kelly fired. Urban Meyer did a lot of it on his own. And now Doug Peterson, right? And I'm not saying those coaches didn't have culpability and responsibility. They absolutely did. But the bottom line is Trent Baalke wins a lot of power struggles. And he has seen a lot of power struggles. And he has seen a lot of losing over the last 10 years. So whoever takes this job is going to face an uphill battle. But they will have all the resources from a salary cap and a draft standpoint. They will have a solid roster in place. They will have a new facility and a quarterback and a wide receiver duo to get excited about, a new stadium incoming. So stay tuned. We will see how this all plays out. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.